Hello and welcome back to Bookish. 2 weeks and I'm out of practice. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a video where I'm just going to try to catch up on what I've been reading, talk a little bit about my TBR for June, even though it's already the middle of the month, and kind of get back into making videos. You know, I'm sure most people aren't aware, but I've been off or haven't made a video for I think a little more than 2 weeks now, which is unusual. You know, I've been doing this for about 5 years, pretty regularly, putting out 2 or 3 videos a week. My mom had some health concerns, and then concerns that built off those concerns, which really kept me away from home, kept me from being in a place where I could film, and to be honest with you, kept me from doing a lot of reading. That plus other obligations I had come up near the end of May and the beginning of June also kind of kept me away. But I thought I would just real quickly do a recap kind of on my reading from the end of May and then into June, talk about my Pride Month TBR, and you know, any other projects I had. So just kind of go through it in random, what I think order. I really only read one book from the end of May through the beginning of June, and that was the book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. This book won the Women's Prize, I believe, and I want to say in 2022, and is a book that I've seen highly recommended. I know Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot loves Ruth Ozeki, loves this book, and I read it, and is oftentimes true, I think, for books in terms of that Scott likes. When I read it, I thought it didn't necessarily impress me in the same way that it seemed to impress him. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a very good book. I think it's really inventive. The writing is so readable and so effective. It has all the qualities of a book that I really like. It just, for me, the story felt a little bit predictable. It felt a little bit predictable in the way in which a book written for younger readers might. And I don't necessarily think that's what Ruth Ozeki had in mind, but it kind of felt that way. It's not that it didn't deal with some pretty, you know, adult themes, but it dealt with them in ways which I think, you know, younger readers would be accessible to younger readers, and a lot of its story elements were things which focused on, you know, really young, a really young character who, you know, I think when the book ends, he's just kind of at the mid-teen stage, maybe. And so for a lot of reasons, I think there are a lot of elements of the book that just did not necessarily appeal to me as, you know, a 56-year-old reader. Again, that doesn't mean it isn't a great book. If you don't know, the Book of Form and Emptiness is a book that follows a young character whose father has died tragically, and that's kind of caused his family to fall apart. And it results in mental health issues for our young character, our protagonist, and for his mother. And we kind of deal with these two stories of these two people in family, mother-son relationship, which, you know, had been really close, and kind of how the teenage years caused that to become distant, how their own struggles with grief and mental health are creating distance and problems, how this young man attempts to cope with this as, you know, his mental challenges become more and more severe. And I thought, you know, it did a really good job of making me care about the characters and making me, you know, interested in the story. But for me, I was much more interested in the mother character than I was in the young man, and the book is really about the young man. So it just kind of missed for me in that way, not that it's not an excellent book. The other book I read and just finished, and this was my first book I was reading for my Pride Month TBR, was Blackout by Justin Torres. This book won the National Book Award, and I'm a little surprised it didn't. I didn't see it on other award lists, or it didn't come up, because I thought the book was really, really good and really, really inventive. Angelia over at her channel did a review of this book, and I'll leave a link to her video down below because her review is going to be much better than mine was. But what I thought when I was reading this is that this is just an incredibly well done look at kind of a sweeping story of the history of the evolution of gay rights and the evolutional way in which gay people in the United States and the Western world are viewed, and all the pitfalls and all the problems and all the, you know, dismissals and all the prejudices against them. And it's told this kind of really, I thought, brilliantly structured narrative fictional form in which we have two characters, one young, one who's old, and they are more or less confined or voluntarily confined to this place they refer to as the Palace, which sounds like low-cost housing to me. that could be afforded by maybe somebody who had developed sickness due to AIDS in the 80s or 90s, and they are essentially living there until they die. And this other young character who comes more or less to, be their companion, to live with them, help them, because they'd had a relationship years before. They'd met in an asylum years before, both confined there for various reasons. They're both Puerto Rican. They're both gay men, even though they don't necessarily really have a relationship with one another. And they come together and they tell each other stories. They tell each other stories about their past. They tell each other stories, that they've invented based on their experience, which they kind of talk about as though they're movies that they're writing. They talk about some unknown figures from the history of, development of ideas and psychological ideas about, members of the LGBTQ plus community, and how to deal with them and how they're treated, and it exposes all the horrible ways in which they were treated, and it's just done in this really inventive way. And I thought it does a lot of things I think really good modernist literary fiction kind of deal with things, or maybe it's postmodernist, I'm never sure of my movements, but it incorporates photographs and images. It incorporates pages from works in the past, and in its most inventive place, and I think this is obviously one of the places where it gets its name, it incorporates pages from studies done, I want to say in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, about members of the homosexual community, and it blacks out words. Those studies were oftentimes done not necessarily by members of that community to help members of that community, but to help the people who are publishing these books make a name and achieve something for themselves. And in that sense, they were using members of the LGBTQ plus community. And it blacks out things to kind of tell a different story. So you get pages from these texts, and they're real texts, in which elements have been blacked out, so that when you read the words that remain, you get what I assume is a completely different story. And as Angelina would point out, the characters themselves black out from time to time and seem to lose consciousness. And I think this is all kind of a really kind of clever conceit the author has created to kind of highlight how often we have blacked out, we have eliminated, erased, covered up LGBTQ plus history in this country. And but it's not a work of history, it is a work of fiction. And I think it does what fiction can do best in kind of drawing our attention to the real things in history that have been tragic, the real things in history that have gone wrong, the real abuses that have taken place, the real neglect that has taken place. And by putting into a fictional context, I think it does a great job of kind of highlighting that, emphasizing that, and bringing that message home. I really thought the book was very, very good and kind of brilliant in its construction. Other than that, because I've been driving back and forth to where my mom lives, which is about a 2.5 hour drive, I think I made that drive back and forth, 4 times in the last couple of weeks, and then I've been spending a lot of time alone while she's being cared for other places. I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks, and I just went on an Elmore Leonard binge. I think I mentioned this before, but when I drive, I really like to listen to audiobooks, and Elmore Leonard kind of works perfectly because, I think this quality writing, I think the characters are really memorable, I think the stories are really engaging, but it's not necessarily something that I have to necessarily be concentrating on all the time. They're fun reads. So I've read both the Raylan books, Pronto and Raylan. I read Freaky Deaky, which is about, old 60s hippies and bomb makers and bomb squad policemen. And I'm almost finished with Gold Coast, which, touches on issues of the mafia and is set in Florida. And I've really enjoyed those books. And they've been just perfect kind of audiobooks for me. And I'm kind of rapidly adding to the books by Elmore Leonard I've read. And I am an admirer of his work as kind of entertainment that I think is written well and creates good characters and good story. So I mentioned that I read Blackouts by Justin Torres as one of the books I had on my Pride Month TBR. I have 2 more books I put on the list, one of which I've already started, and that's The New Life by Tom Crewe. Been meaning to read this, I think, since January, and it just, occurred to me that this would be a good month to read it. I'm about 120 pages in, and I'm still not sure about it. I don't think it's a book I'm going to DNF, but it is not a book that 130 pages in, so that's about a third of the way in, has really knocked my socks off. When I finish it, I'll give more of my thoughts, but it kind of feels like a little bit of, Maurice, a little bit of other books set kind of maybe in the late Victorian period, and it hasn't really necessarily established its feet for me as a truly good work of literature yet, but it still has 2/3 to go. And the other book I planned on reading for Pride Month was last night, The Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. It's a book that did the rounds of BookTube for a while. I have an e-copy. It's on my Kindle. Not realizing it was kind of, I want to say, YA-ish, but that's fine. That should make it a really interesting read for me in all kinds of ways, so I'm going to get to that one. And also, am kind of committed to doing my Reading Bad Hemingway project, and this month I am reading Across the River and Into the Trees, kind of a notoriously bad Hemingway novel, and really the last bad Hemingway novel I think that he completed in his lifetime. It's not posthumous at all. And so I'm reading that. Jack the Rambling Raconteur is also reading, and he's probably already finished. Like I said, all the other things that took place this month kind of got in my way and slowed me down. But I will be getting to that, and it shouldn't take me very long to read it since it is a reread and it's Hemingway. The other thing I've been doing that also really came up right at the end of May and the beginning of June is that my own book is nearing, has really reached its completion in terms of the editorial process. But in the last 4 weeks or so, the last month, I've had to reread my own book twice to do the edits and go through proofs and to try to catch as many mistakes as I possibly could. And I had to create an index for the book, which was far more involved and complicated than I thought it was going to be, or I remembered it from being the first book, and that's taken up a lot of my time. And there's nothing I think that will do more to destroy your confidence in your own work than having to read it multiple times. So, I think if you count how many drafts I've done and how many times I've read my own book, which by the way is MacArthur's Bloody Butchers, it will be out in the UK at the end of July. It'll be out in the US at the end of September. I'll leave links where you can pre-order it down below if you're, so motivated to order a military history which focuses on the lives of 4 soldiers who are in a particular company who fought in the Pacific. But rereading that has really just kind of restored any faith I have in my own writing, because there's only so much. It's like listening to yourself talk. Like, for instance, I make BookTube videos. I almost never rewatch my BookTube videos. I only do it when somebody in a comment, usually, this is way more than you want to know, but hey, I haven't made a video for a while. So a lot of times, you make videos and the comments all come in and you address the comments as they come in. Like I've said, that's my favorite thing to do. But sometimes years will go by and somebody will leave a comment asking a question on a video you made a long time ago or making a point, and I have to go back and watch the video to know exactly what I said that they're responding to, because I don't always have, an encyclopedic memory of that. And whenever I watch those, I'm just dumbfounded by how many times I say or my own kind of scatterbrainness, or my hand motions, or whatever it is that distract me. And listening to yourself talk about something over and over again isn't very pleasant, and neither is reading necessarily something you've written. Even though, I feel like I did a good job writing the book, and I feel like the writing is good, reading it just starts to feel kind of disjointed. It starts to feel like the sentences no longer make sense, that something that makes perfect sense no longer makes sense. Something that you wrote, a sentence that has, is complicated, seems to be overly complicated. A sentence that's simple seems to be overly simple, and it's just been really nerve-wracking. My book's only going to be about 200 pages of text that's to be read, not counting index and notes and those kind of things. But that 400 pages has been relatively painful, and the worst part of it is, since I'm signing off on the final proofs pretty much as soon as I turn the camera off here, I know there's still mistakes in there. I know that there are things that I missed, that the editors missed, that are just going to end up in print. and there's nothing I could do about it other than read the book again, which at this point, in the final proof stage, you really can't make changes at this stage anyway, because it's all set up and the pagination is right, and it corresponds with the index. So I just have to live with it the way it is, which is far more difficult to live with than you may think. Anyway, enough of my whining. There you go. There's my video for this week. Thanks for your patience. You've been waiting for me to make a video, and thanks for your understanding if you haven't, and thanks for watching.